Hey guys, Bartel's Bookshelf here with a different kind of video than I normally do. Aaron suggested this idea, and I thought, why not? My second love to books is movies. I actually used to primarily watch movies before I got back into reading books, but my collection isn't as nearly as large as my books. It's actually all on basically one big shelf. And so Aaron said, "Hey, like, why don't you just go through your films, your movie collections, your DVDs, your Blu-rays?" And I was like, "Okay, that's a good idea. I have enough on here that I could do it in a few videos, unlike a bookshelf tour, which would take way too long and I would never finish." I'm splitting my collection into sort of loose categories. This first one is all of my Criterion films. So Criterion, obviously, you know, they're a great very necessary movie distribution company. Put out lots of varied sort of film classics, you know, ranging from sort of art house to genre. Yeah, I don't have a lot of their stuff because it's really expensive, and I only try to keep things that I really that or to when it comes to movies anyway. I've been trying to keep stuff that means a lot to me that I really want to keep. But also, if it's just Criterion, I want to keep it anyway because they're just so nice and, you know, well put together and collectible. You know, some of these are Blu-rays, some of them are DVDs. The older ones are DVDs, and those tend to be ones that I got for birthdays or Christmas or whatever. Also, I should mention these aren't in any order; they're not alphabetical or anything. I literally just grabbed these and put them in a loose stack here, so this is just totally random. But anyway, let's just start here. So the first Criterion I have is Being John Malkovich from 1999, directed by Spike Jonze. Spike Jonze is one of my favorite film directors ever. I love all of his stuff. Granted, his filmography isn't huge, but all of his feature films I've loved. I love his music videos. I love his short films. The commercial he did recently for Apple Home with FKA Twigs is like one of my favorite things ever. He's just so he has such a sardonic sense of humor and such a sort of an impish sense of sort of surrealism to his work that I just really enjoy. And this movie is wonderful. It's imaginative. It's beautifully shot. It's funny. The performances are great. In fact, I think John Malkovich himself was nominated for it or for an Academy Award for this, I believe. Yeah. So John Cusack plays a struggling puppeteer who gets a job in the 7.5 floor of an office building. As a file clerk, and while there, he finds a portal inside the head of John Malkovich. You see the world through his eyes for about 15 minutes, and then you're spat out on the side of the New Jersey Turnpike, and it's just basically about the trials and tribulations that result from finding this portal. And it's very surrealist, as I said, very funny in a sort of Monty Python-esque, sort of absurdist way. I love it. But it's also got a lot of like surprising amount of pathos in it. The stuff that it says about sort of relationships and the desire to be somebody else. It's surprisingly heartfelt and poignant. I admit, like, the ending always gets me just a tinge emotional. It just leaves me. I don't know. I can't even describe it, but it's with the feeling that it leaves me. But yeah, this is one of my favorite movies. I've watched it so many times, dozens of times. I love Spike Jonze. I have some more of his stuff that I'll talk about later. I don't have everything on Blu-ray or DVD, unfortunately, because I pared down this collection a lot, and I haven't rebought a lot of his movies on Blu-ray, but I have some of his stuff that I'll talk about in my later videos. Next we have Häxan. I don't know how you pronounce the umlaut, but... from 1922, directed by Benjamin Christensen. This is a silent horror film from Sweden, I believe, or Denmark. So yeah, from Denmark. So this is a Danish film that's ostensibly sort of a loose episodic documentary about sort of witchcraft through the ages. In fact, that was the subtitle, Witchcraft Through the Ages, where it starts out talking about sort of the history of witchcraft and superstition, showing off some old like historical drawings and devices and things like that. But then it gradually turns into this like weird, surreal, creepy exploration of like sort of recreations of witches' rituals and things. So like you see witches, doing their Black Sabbath and flying on their broomsticks to meet the devil and stuff like that. And it gets into this really lurid, grotesque, creepy atmosphere that is just unmatched in anything really, in silent films or in the modern era. It's not quite German expressionist, but the imagery is like so shadowy and gothic and grotesque, and there's like some phantasmagorical, just wild images in this movie. Like one of my favorites is this door to this like witches like celebration area that's like flanked by these like giant pigmen creatures, and it's just so, the fact that it's so old and all of the effects in it are like sort of primitive by today's standards, in my eyes, kind of enhances sort of the creepy, vintagey atmosphere of it. Silent films are often sort of known for being a bit unsettling to modern audiences, but when it comes to just like pure weirdness and creepiness, and I don't know, there's just something about this that is just so hypnotizing and so wonderful. I love it. It's great. I watch it. Me and Aaron watch it almost every Halloween. In fact, actually, this Blu-ray edition came out very recently, I think in 2019, and we were so happy to have it because before it was only available on DVD, and they did a great job with this transfer, and that cover is awesome. That's one of the images in the movie of one of the demons, doing his rites or whatever, and that's what he looks like. And Benjamin Christensen, the director himself, actually plays the devil at one point, trying to seduce a nun, which is pretty funny. But yeah, so that's Häxan. That's a great movie. I recommend that. The next one on here, this is one of the DVDs. I think I got this as a teenager, believe it or not. I don't know how I convinced my parents to get it, but this is some might say a controversial pick. This is Salò, or The 120 Days of Sodom, from 1976, directed by Pier Paolo Pasolini. This is a notorious Italian film that is an adaptation of, I believe it was an unfinished novel by the Marquis de Sade, where it's the same story, but it's transplanted to fascist Italy, where it's a bunch of young boys and young girls taken by these Italian libertines to this palazzo in the middle of nowhere, where they're subjected to 120 days of physical, sexual, and psychological torture. Obviously, this is a very controversial film, one that is unfairly maligned, I believe, as just sick pornography. I think this is a very powerful movie. It's not a comfortable watch, but I mean, it shouldn't be. Just the way that it deals with sort of power dynamics and sort of power imbalances, and especially by having it in a fascist setting, it makes it an explicitly political statement about, authoritarianism and fascism and the way that power corrupts and the things that, the things that the very powerful do to people. I think it's significant that a lot of the perpetrators in this film are, sort of rich, sort of fascist, libertine types. You could almost read it as like, a political statement about, the power of the rich and the bourgeoisie. I mean, you can read so many things into this movie, and it's also just, it's vile, but in a beautiful way. There's a scene towards the end of the movie that is just so horrifying, and it's in the way that it sort of makes us part of the observer. It makes us complicit in observing these actions, these horrible actions, and I don't know. There's just something so powerful and angry about it. But it's restrained as well, which I think makes the disturbing events even more disturbing, because there's this kind of unsentimental look to it. I don't know. It's a beautiful film. and it was Pasolini's final film. He was tragically killed soon after the release of it. People aren't sure why. They don't know if it was politically motivated or just a random killing or what. But yeah, he was a very interesting, very influential, very powerful filmmaker, and I think this is probably his masterpiece, in my opinion. So that's Salò. This was one that Aaron really wanted. We bought this. I think this is our most recent Criterion, I believe. Yeah, 2020. So this is our most recent buy from Criterion. This is Three Fantastic Journeys by Carl Zeman. This is a box set of 3 films. It is a Journey to the Beginning of Time, Invention for Destruction, and The Fabulous Baron Munchausen. These are 3 films by Carl Zeman, who is a very influential Czech filmmaker, illusionist. He made lots of films in the 50s and 60s that are these sort of like fantastical, phantasmagoric adventures, with like dinosaurs and sea monsters and just strange, fantastical, events. And they all have this style to them where this kind of gives you an idea, where they have this sort of a almost 1800 like 19th century like woodcut look to them. They have almost like a silent film vibe to them. They're all very tinted. They feel very vintage. Very, very influential, very imaginative. I guess you could sort of compare him to Georges Méliès in a way, although he was much later, where it was all about, this kind of gives you some idea, just all about the cinematic magic, the cinematic illusions, and this actually has a pretty cool pop-up thing. See that? This is Baron Munchausen flying away on the cannonball. In fact, are all of these? Yeah, these are all pop-up books. This is Journey to the Beginning of Time with a woolly mammoth there. And what is this? Invention for Destruction, which is sort of like a Jules Verne type thing. You see that? Isn't that awesome? So yeah, his movies are very entertaining, very imaginative, very sort of, as I said, sort of a surreal and magical in a way that I love. If you haven't noticed, there's kind of a recurring theme with a lot of my favorite films. I can't get this back in the fucking thing. But yeah, so this is a great box set. I'm very happy to have it. Aaron was very happy to have it. Carl Zeman, he introduced me to Carl Zeman. He likes a lot of these sort of stop motion film illusionist types. So yeah, that's really cool. And there's actually a really interesting documentary about Carl Zeman and sort of some of the techniques he used to make his films. I'll link that in the description. I suggest you give that a watch. It's very interesting. Next, I have another one of my favorite movies. This is Cat People from 1942, directed by Jacques Tourneur, produced by Val Lewton. This is a horror classic, very, very, very influential, about a woman who, a mysterious foreign woman, a Serbian emigre in Manhattan, who believes that due to an ancient curse that whenever her sort of passions are inflamed, she'll turn into a cat and sort of wreak havoc on her lovers. And what was so influential about this, and what is so good about it, in my opinion, is that it's all about the power of suggestion. In a different director and producer's hands, this could have been just kind of a B horror movie, with like shitty-looking cat monsters, and there's nothing wrong with that. But what makes this film so special is the way that it pioneered the sort of cinematic trickery that a lot of films play on now, where you don't actually see the monster. Nothing that there are no confirmed supernatural events in the film, so it's sort of left to your imagination. Is it all in her head? Is the curse real? Is this just some kind of releasing of her id that she's sort of sublimated, and invented as this curse? It's a great movie. It's very low budget, very short, but very influential. Beautiful photography by Nicholas Musaraka, who was a great cinematographer for RKO. He shot a bunch of classic film noir and horror films like this, and he shot Out of the Past with Robert Mitchum, which is one of my other favorite movies. So yeah, this is another masterpiece in my opinion. Super influential, creepy, some wonderfully atmospheric sequences in here. Like there's a famous sequence where a girl's walking home down the street, trying to catch a bus. There's another famous scene in a swimming pool. Just really great, creepy 40s era horror film, a classic. Highly recommend that. This is kind of an interesting one. This was just one that I bought. This is one that I bought on a whim. This wasn't one that I'd heard of or seen before, but it looked interesting, so I wanted to. So I think I bought this from Barnes and Noble because they always have sales of Criterion Blu-rays and stuff. This is Tokyo Drifter from 1966, directed by Seijun Suzuki. Again, I haven't seen this in a while, but I remember really, really liking it. Seijun Suzuki was a very influential sort of Japanese new wave filmmaker in the 60s. He made lots of sort of B Yakuza films for I think it was Nikatsu. Yeah, Nikatsu. But he had this very idiosyncratic style, which you can kind of see here. It was very sort of exquisitely photographed, lots of vivid colors and surreal, almost expressionist set design. They were sort of very stylized, somewhat incomprehensible, basically too artsy for Nikatsu, and for a while he was actually blacklisted from making films because he was just so his style was just so idiosyncratic and controversial. He couldn't find anybody to make films with. But this is one of the films that established his reputation. It really the plot doesn't really matter. This is one of those filmmakers, kind of like Dario Argento or whatever, where it's all about atmosphere and style rather than plot and character. But it's about a reformed killer whose attempts to go straight is thwarted when his former cohorts call him back to Tokyo to help battle a rival gang. So yeah, it's heavily stylized. It's almost like a mix of like a noir film and like a Technicolor, like MGM musical. Like, it's so stylized and choreographed that it almost kind of has that vibe, and it's really, really interesting. I haven't seen a lot of Suzuki's other films, but I know he's got a few more that were released through Criterion, and some other ones that I've just heard a lot of good things about. Branded to Kill is another one that I really want to see, but this was really good. I actually should watch this again. It's been a while since I've seen it, but I remember really liking it, so that's Tokyo Drifter. This is another one of my favorite movies. A lot of the stuff I buy through Criterion is stuff that I already know that I like, and are like favorites that I want to like have really nice editions of. This is The Innocence from 1961, directed by Jack Clayton. Again, one of my favorite movies of all time, one of my favorite horror films of all time. This was adapted from the famous Henry James novella, The Turn of the Screw, which is about an English governess who comes to this house to take care of these two children, a boy and a girl. And mysterious things start happening. The kids are acting very strange, and she starts to wonder if perhaps the place is haunted, and the kids are being possessed by the ghosts of the people who used to live there. But again, kind of like Cat People, one of the things that this film and the original novella did was that there are no explicitly supernatural events in the movie. It's all very subjective, and so again, you're kind of left wondering, is it all in her head? Is there actually a haunting? What's real? What's not? And this movie is a wonderfully gothic, haunted house film, just dripping with atmosphere. The black and white photography was by Freddie Francis, who's one of my favorite cinematographers. Every shot in this film is so exquisitely composed; it looks like a painting. There's beautiful shots of the English countryside, and then there's like big, imposing shots of this manor, and it just has such a sumptuous look to it that is just so just wonderful. So yeah, and the performances are great. Deborah Carr as the governess is fantastic. She gives like the performance of her life. It's so good, and the child actors are really great too. Actually, one of whom, Pamela Franklin, actually went on to be in some other British films of note. She was in the film adaptation of Hell House, which I haven't seen, but I know she's in that. So yeah, the acting's great, the cinematography is beautiful and sumptuous, the atmosphere is foreboding. You can definitely see how this was an influence on filmmakers like Del Toro for Crimson Peak and things like that. So if you liked Crimson Peak, Caleb, I know you're watching. If you liked that, you'll love this. At least I think you will. So yeah, definitely highly recommended. Another classic black and white film. This is, again, one of my absolute favorites. This is Beauty and the Beast from 1946, directed by Jean Cocteau. It says here, Jean Cocteau's sublime adaptation of Madame Le Prince de Beaumont's fairy tale masterpiece, and that really is the way to put it. It's sublime. Jean Cocteau was a famous gay artist. He was a poet, and he made a lot of films, including this and Orphée, which is sort of a reinterpretation of the Orpheus legend. Really fascinating, really influential person. And this is pretty much the definitive film adaptation of this story. This famous story of the redemption of love, redemption through love, seeing the beauty in the beast, all these classic themes. In fact, actually, a lot of elements in this version were basically stolen for the Disney film, which I love the Disney film too. Don't get me wrong, but this was a heavy influence on that. But yeah, Beauty and the Beast is my favorite fairy tale. I'm obligated to watch as many adaptations. If I learn about an adaptation of it that I haven't seen or read, I have to go find it. So this is one of my favorite fairy tales of all time. This is one of the best adaptations of it. It's this beautifully, gorgeously shot, wonderfully surreal, romantic fantasy film that perfectly recreates this sort of fantastical, dangerous, sumptuous feel of a fairy tale. It's just so magical and so gothic at the same time. The set design is amazing. Like, there's a scene where Belle is running through this hallway, and in slow motion, and all the candelabras are these like arms that are emerging from the walls, and they like sort of turn and follow her. Lots of like wonderfully imaginative sort of cinematographic tricks like that that I just love. And yeah, there's the performances are great, very beautifully romantic. Josette Day as Belle is amazing, but like Jean Marais as the Beast is like iconic. He's amazing. He's romantic. He's scary. He's sad. It's beautiful. It's amazing, and this is actually very, very faithful to the fairy tale too. It doesn't sort of try to smooth a lot of things over like the Disney version did, but I like it for that. I think it pretty much is the definitive film version of this story. No frills, just Beauty and the Beast. Like, this is what I think of when I think of Beauty and the Beast, aside from Disney, is this movie. Yeah, I love it. It's such an amazing, beautiful, sumptuously photographed film. The actually interesting thing about Jean Marais, he was Jean Cocteau's lover, so that adds sort of an interesting dimension to the film. But yeah, that comes with my highest recommendation. I love it. Again, one of my favorite films of all time. And again, you're probably noticing a theme here, but this is Brazil from 1985, directed by Terry Gilliam. This is the final cut, so this is the definitive version, of course. Again, Terry Gilliam is one of my favorite directors. There's nobody out there making movies like him. He's in, like a lot of the other filmmakers I've mentioned that are my favorites, like Spike Jonze, Jean Cocteau. They're in a league of their own. Like, nobody makes movies like they do. You see their films and these are true auteurs. This is their style. Like, nobody could have made this but them. And Terry Gilliam is definitely one of those. If you're familiar with Monty Python, he did the animations for those, and I always loved those. They're grotesque and surreal and funny, much like the show itself. And his films carry on that premise, that theme. This is a sort of a pastiche of 1984, set in this authoritarian society where Sam Lowry is a file clerk who works for the Ministry of Information. It's this very gray, dour, depressing world. Basically, no room for sort of imagination or anything like that. But the secret thing about Sam Lowry is that he's a dreamer, and the movie is frequently preoccupied with his flights of fancy, where the film just sort of cuts loose, and all of these like amazing, surreal, imaginative things happen. Like he keeps having this fantasy about being this knight with these big angel wings, which this sort of represents here. Fighting off this giant like samurai creature, stuff like that. It's just so freewheeling and imaginative. I don't want to say anything about the plot because I don't want to spoil anything, but sort of a theme in this film, and a theme that Gilliam comes back to frequently, like in this and Adventures of Baron Munchausen, is sort of the importance of imagination and fantasy, how fantasy can be an escape, and not only an escape, but fantasy can actually be preferable to the world that we live in. And this is a hilarious, satirical, imaginative, freewheeling, chaotic example of that theme. And it's not it's unusual. It's very sad in parts. It's very dark, but it's I love it. It's great. And yeah, this is specifically the final cut because infamously, when this originally came out, it was truncated. It was edited without Gilliam's approval. There was a huge battle to sort of get his version released. So this is that, and this is the one you should see. I mean, watch Brazil where however you can find it, but I think most versions are the final cut these days. So if you can find it, watch it. It's one of my favorites. It's great. Another very idiosyncratic film here. But again, a personal favorite. This is House, or Hausu, from 1977, directed by Nobuhiko Obayashi. How do I even describe this? If you know, you know. This is a notorious Japanese sort of cult film that's it's sort of horror, it's like comedy, it's like surrealist art. I don't even know how to explain it. It's one of the most bizarre, psychedelic, weird movies I've ever seen, but it's so... I just find myself like in awe of just the audacity and the imagination of it. It's just so bizarre, so wonderfully bizarre. It's basically about six classmates a schoolgirl who travels with six classmates to her ailing aunt's creaky country home, and there's there's evil spirits, there's a demonic cat, there's a girl who gets eaten by a piano. There's all kinds of weird, hilarious, strange imagery in this, and it's all done with like Matt's animation and collage effects. It has a very like DIY like videotaped feeling to it. Like it almost feels like a DIY like low budget like punk zine come to life in a way, but like directed by Mario Bava. Like, I don't even know. Like, the back of the case describes it as, how to describe Nobuhiko Obayashi's indescribable 1977 movie House as a psychedelic ghost tale, a stream of consciousness bedtime story, an episode of Scooby-Doo as directed by Mario Bava. Any of the above will do for this hallucinatory head trip. And that's really, they said it better than I could, so if that sounds interesting to you, then I highly recommend it. It's bonkers, it's crazy. There's nothing else like all these movies here that I've talked about so far. I mean, there's nothing else out there like it that I know of. It's very unique and very interesting. So that's House. And actually, I'm ashamed to say, this is one that I actually haven't seen. I received this as a Christmas present, and it's a classic. I've always been meaning to watch it, but I just have never gotten around to it. This is Rosemary's Baby, from 1968, directed by Roman Polanski. Obviously, this is a classic horror film about a woman who is giving birth to, or who is impregnated with the devil's son, and sort of the trauma and and the horror that results from that. Obviously, I know I'm very aware of this movie. It's a classic. I almost feel like I've already seen this movie just through osmosis, through other people talking about it and reputation and retrospectives on TV and YouTube and stuff. But I've never actually sat down and watched the whole thing beginning to end. And I love Roman Polanski. I know, he's a problematic fave, but we're talking about the art, not the artist here. But I think he is a deservedly renowned director, and I've seen a lot of his films that I really enjoyed. I mean, Chinatown is a classic. I really like parts of the Ninth Gate. I just love the feeling of that movie more than anything. But more than anything, and I actually really enjoyed one of his more recent films. What was it called? Carnage. That was really, really interesting. But yeah, so this is a classic. I've never seen it. Always meant to. I know this is a lot of people's favorite. So yeah, I do want to watch that at some point. So I'm excited to get to that. And then finally, we have Vampyr. From 1932, directed by Carl Theodor Dreyer. Dreyer, much like Benjamin Christensen, was a Danish film director. Started out in the silent era, made one of the most well-renowned classic films of the silent era, The Passion of Joan of Arc. And this was his follow-up to that, Vampyr, which is a sort of a surreal, disconnected, very dreamlike, sort of mesmerizing story about vampires, very classical vampires. It's like a lot of the movies that I've talked about, and a lot of my favorites. This is another one that's very surreal, very gothic, almost like I said, sort of disjointed and dreamlike. It's from the 30s, and there's a little bit of sound, but it basically plays like a silent film with the expressionist imagery, the heavy contrast, the deep shadows. It's just it's really odd, and it's really interesting. Sort of you could almost see this as like a companion piece to Nosferatu, since they sort of came out around the same time and explore a lot of the same ideas. But this is a lot more. This is a lot more obtuse and a lot more dreamlike and a lot more artsy, I guess you'd say. But it's really, really interesting. I actually haven't watched this in a while. This is another one I should rewatch. But I really liked it. And this comes with a booklet called Writing Vampyr, which is the actual screenplay by Carl Theodor Dreyer and Kristin Juhl. And this also actually contains Carmilla by Sheridan Le Fanu, which of course is a classic lesbian vampire story, which this film was loosely inspired by, as a lot of vampire stories are. So that's actually pretty cool. I forgot that that was in here. Of course, I have Carmilla in a bunch of other random collections. I have the Penguin Book of Vampires back there, but still, that's a really cool thing for them to put in there. So that's what I like about Criterion. The extras and the little like supplemental things, the behind the scenes stuff, the essays sometimes are more interesting than the movie itself. So that's something that I've always appreciated about them. But yeah, so that's Vampyr, and that is my final. That is my final DVD for this stack and this category. That was all of my Criterion films. So I hope you enjoyed that. Have you seen any of these films? What do you think? Do you have any favorites? Do you have any Criterion films that you particularly like? Any additions that you recommend? Yeah, let me know. I like movies just as much as well, maybe not just as much as I like books, but I like movies, obviously. So, yeah, let me know. Like, comment, and subscribe. All that stuff. And I'll see you guys next time with the next category of films, whatever I decide to do next time, in my DVD collection, DVD and Blu-ray collection. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys later. Bye!